So I just wanted to very quickly introduce myself. As I said, I'm Regina, and I'm the Executive Director of Food Recovery Network, which is a national nonprofit headquartered here in Washington, D.C., which is really awesome to say because up until we were created about 9 years ago and had up until about right before COVID started, had been headquartered in College Park, Maryland, where we were first started. Food Recovery Network empowers college students all across the country to recover surplus food from their dining halls. And then we safely package up that food and donate it locally to nonprofits that help to feed the community. So homeless shelters, soup kitchens, food pantries, even other nonprofit community gatherings that might need food or might feed those in the community. And we also work with businesses, events, basically anywhere where there's food, that there might be surplus food that's still left in the kitchen. We will work directly with those organizations, those conferences, corporate dining, cafeterias, to also create a recovery plan and recover that food locally. And to date, we've recovered over 4.2 million pounds of food, and that is almost 4 million meals when you convert that to people who are in need. And during this really troubling time of the pandemic, that number of people who don't know where their next meal is coming from has just really been exacerbated. There are so many people in our communities that are in need of really good food. So that's what I do during the day. And if you have questions about that, please feel free to reach out. And in my spare time, when I'm not doing social justice work, I like to do all kinds of other things, and including I like to ferment food. I love cooking. I love gardening. I just love everything about food. So I'm definitely, with Food Recovery Network in a really good place. And so I have been, mostly working with food. I mean, since I was about 10 years old. It was, one of my first chores as a young person in my family to make dinner for everybody who was out working and things. So I've been cooking for a very long time. I've been interested in food and nutrition, around the lines of water, canning, preservation for over a decade now, and fermentation is just a natural inclusion into my personal food journey. I like to preserve food for a lot of different reasons that we'll get into, and I want to just say I'm very casual about these classes that I teach, and so please feel free to chat if you have questions, or feel free to unmute yourself if you have questions, and I'll definitely be sure to answer to the best of my knowledge. And if I don't know, I'll definitely say that. And perhaps somebody else on this webinar today might know the answer, because I know a lot of times we ourselves have dabbled in the particular topic that we are tuning in for, maybe to get more information, to see what others do, and maybe some of us are completely new to this. And again, this particular topic happens to be around fermentation. So please don't be shy. So I just wanted to talk really quickly about what is fermentation. And so it's, again, it's definitely a scientific process that happens. There's a lot of chemistry involved. But for us, we can just say it is a metabolic process that basically converts sugars into acid or gas or alcohol. And, metabolism is the totality of organic and inorganic matter. So you can think about, our cells, anything living and also organic. That whole process together is metabolism. So again, fermentation is the metabolic process that converts sugars. You can also say carbs if you want to, sugars, into acid, gas, or alcohol. And so when foods are fermented, basically what happens is that creates a natural preservant for the food. When the sugars are broken down, they also help to make the food more digestible to your body, which is really important. So a term that you might have heard is when the sugars are broken down and the fermentation process is started, that makes the food more bioavailable. And essentially what that means is when food is starting to get digested, when the sugars are broken down, that's part of digestion, your body can recognize that process a lot more readily available than it might if, we're eating things like corn syrup, like the Doritos that sometimes I eat, or other processed foods. The way that those foods are chemically presented to our bodies, it takes a lot longer for our bodies to break that stuff down because it's not how nature would necessarily present it into our bodies, into our digestive system. And so one of the benefits of eating fermented foods then is because it is already starting with that breakdown process, the fermentation is already sort of digesting the food. If we are eating a lot of foods that our body needs a lot of energy to break down itself, it can cause inflammation in our gut, in our intestines. And so eating fermented foods can help reduce that inflammation. And when we're eating fermented foods, it helps to ensure that that inflammation isn't happening in the first place. So it's really, really good on your digestive system. And then there's lots of benefits, but another benefit I want to highlight about eating fermented foods is that it helps to keep us healthy. It helps to keep us nice and strong. And, now that we're living in a time of a pandemic, before that it was, you think about the flu season. When you are healthy to begin with, it's harder to get sick. And so a lot of times people look to more natural diets because they want to stay healthy in the first place. And fermentation helps to ensure that you are staying healthy in the first place. Because again, your body isn't working really, really, really hard to break down foods that are foreign to your body. Another benefit to fermentation is that it does introduce bacteria and yeast into our bodies. And because of the natural process of fermentation, that bacteria that is able to survive during the fermentation process is actually good bacteria for our body. And the process of fermenting foods actually makes the environment really harsh, actually, for bad bacteria. So that's why the food is able to be preserved, because it's not spoiling. It's quite the opposite, it's being preserved. And that bacteria is really good for our gut health. And that might be a term that some of us have heard. When we think about our gut health, it is, what are the bacteria that are present in our stomachs, in our intestines, that help to keep us healthy and strong. And so again, the healthier we are, the harder it is for us to get sick, or the longer it takes for us to get worn down and to get sick. So I definitely suggest, if you can, incorporating more fermented foods into your diet. And I will also just caution, if you're not used to eating fermented foods, or if you're only used to eating a particular kind of fermented food, like maybe yogurt, for example, that you just incorporate the stuff slowly, just because it will be new for your body if you aren't used to it. And a lot of times when we're introducing fermented foods, that good bacteria that goes along with it, a lot of times there is actually bad bacteria present in your body, and there's a little bit of a battle that happens while the good bacteria takes over. And unfortunately, that sometimes that can cause your stomach to feel a little, upset. And that feeling can be different in all of us. Some of us might eat some new fermented foods that we've never tried before and feel totally fine. It is just a caution and just a warning, because I don't want anyone to get turned off by eating fermented foods, but like anything, you know, that you're introducing, take it slow and see how you feel along the way. Another benefit outside of the health benefits to fermenting your own foods is it's really fun. I love it. I think it's fun to have jars of things that are sitting out on my countertops. And once it's finished in my refrigerator, that I know that I personally have fermented. It's really fun for me. It's a new way of introducing flavors into your diet, and I just really like that. But the other thing is, you know, if you do like to eat and you buy kimchi or sauerkraut, any foods like that, yogurt, it can sometimes be kind of expensive. And so when you're making your own kimchi or your own sauerkraut, both of which are cabbage, it's really a lot cheaper to do this yourself. And you also know exactly what you're doing to your food. So there's just a lot of power that goes along with being able to ferment your own foods. Okay, so again, feel free to chat any questions that you might have or any comments that you have. Maybe if there's a particular kind of fermented food that you like a lot, please do feel free to share it with us. I know that this is being recorded, but since we do have some people who are listening in live time, that might be kind of fun to see what we hear from one another, and it could spark you know, a nice tangent conversation. Okay, so I wanted to go through a few of the different methods for fermentation, and then I have a few examples of fermentation that I wanted to show everyone. I realized too, in putting this class together, that I have a lot of different things that are fermenting in my house. So it's pretty fun. Okay, so the first kind of fermentation is really ancient, super old, and not overly complex. And that is using salt fermentation. And when we use a salt fermentation, basically what we do is salt acts as a method for pulling out moisture from the foods that we are preserving. And that's really awesome because a lot of times when we think about water, that creates an environment where bad bacteria can get in. So I often try to tell people, you know, when you're making, for example, anything with oils for your face, you know, DIY beauty products, for example, keep your oils away from water. So you might not necessarily want to keep it, you know, in your shower, because that can lead to bacteria getting in to the surface of your containers, and, you know, bad bacteria can happen. So salt is a way that it draws moisture out of the product. So think about maybe fish, for example. And then it also creates, because of the chemical process that's happening, it creates a very safe, as I was mentioning before, environment for the food to continue to ferment. And a lot of times that looks like, if you had, like, again, an example of a piece of fish that started off, you know, a pound of fish, by the time all the moisture is taken out of that fish and it's preserved, it's a lot less weight than what it started off with, because all that moisture has been taken out. So another example that also deals with salt is brining. Now this is interesting, because brining actually includes salt with water, where you dissolve salt in some water, and then you add some spices and herbs to flavor that now salty water. And then you actually submerge the food into that brine. And so in this instance, there's so much salt present in the water that, again, that bad bacteria cannot make a home in that brine. And when the food is submerged, now the whole area of food is being protected by that salt, and the fermentation process can start. Now I will tell you, once I made fermented pickles, And I had a bunch of different containers. You know, I had some gallon jars and some smaller jars, and I ran out of containers where I could safely submerge my pickles down into the brine. And I ended up using my crock pot, you know, my ceramic crock pot dish. And I just got whatever I could to try to keep I was using whole cucumbers actually to try to keep those cucumbers down. And, you know, with fermentation, it's a slow process. So it takes, you know, between, depending on what you're fermenting, a day or two, all the way up to a week or longer. And so I walked away from my pickles, and you know, a few days later, I came back. All the other jars were doing great, but that wonky sized crock pot ceramic dish, some of the pickles had sort of come up around onto the water, and they were poking up, and it had mold all over it. And so I had to throw away all of those, or compost all of those cucumbers, because when they were exposed and poking up outside of that healthy brine, that's where the bad bacteria got in. So really bummed out about that, but you know, it happens to the best of us. And now I'm just really careful when I am brining to make, you know, pickles of all kinds. You know, you can make our regular pickles that we know of. You can make pickles out of carrots, zucchini, by putting it into that, you know, salt water or vinegar water type brine. Another method for fermentation that I wanted to talk to everyone about is whey. And whey is a byproduct of when you make cheese. When you remove all the milk solids from that product, there's a clear liquid that is basically lactose. And so I actually have some here. This is some whey that I actually strained from some yogurt that I made. And it was just a regular batch of yogurt. And I wanted that yogurt to be a lot thicker. And so I took some cheesecloth and I put the yogurt in the cheesecloth, and all the whey dripped out of the yogurt. And so here we are with some whey. So this is a starter culture. And you can use this whey in lacto-fermentation. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is lacto-fermentation. And so when we think about yogurt, for example, when we read what are the live ingredients here, the lactobacillus, I can never say that right. That's what this can produce, and that is a really good bacteria for your body. And this kind of bacteria loves salt, and again, so it creates that nice environment so that good bacteria can flourish, and the bad bacteria it cannot survive. So this is this whey is already, you know, here it is already, once I introduce it to a product, such as I could put some, for example, some tomatoes and some carrots, and, you know, make a little salsa and pour this over my salsa, and then that salsa will start to lacto-ferment because of the whey that I've introduced. And this whey has that good bacteria that can help with that fermentation. Let's see, I want to make sure that I'm doing, oh, right. So when we think about whey, another thing that I just wanted to add is that sometimes people don't like the flavor of just whey. It might be too salty. And so you can add other flavorings to whey, like sugars, for example. And again, you know, when you let it sit, the sugar and the whey are part of the fermentation process. So And it all just goes into, you know, what your personal preference is as you get a little bit more advanced or along the lines, along the way of your fermentation journey. Okay. Another starter fermentation process is with a SCOBY. And that is for a very specific kind of fermentation, and that is to make kombucha. And I don't know if any of you here today, if any of you like to drink kombucha. I happen to love it. I have been brewing my own kombucha for, let's see, almost probably like 6 or 7 years now. I love it. And I will also say, if any of you are interested in making your own kombucha, I have enough SCOBY, which is the symbiotic combination of bacteria and yeast, SCOBY, to help you get started. So please be in touch with Josh. He has my contact information, and I am more than happy to give you your own little jar of a SCOBY mother. We call it a mother because that is the beginning origins for your kombucha. And so I actually wanted to show you, I will show you my home brew. I'm in the process of making more of the liquid for the kombucha. So it's a little bit lower than it normally is, but what's great about it is you'll be able to see the SCOBY really well. So let me take you on a quick little journey here over to my corner where I hope you can see. Here we go. This is my continuous brew kombucha setup. And kombucha is another one of these things where once you have the power to make your own kombucha, you will save a lot of money, because kombucha in the stores can be very expensive. And also, a lot of times they add additional sugar to the kombucha. So now when I talk about, you know, some of these methods for making fermentation, when sugar is involved, that is food for the bacteria or the yeast. So they break down that sugar. And so the byproduct that you're left with actually has very little actual sugar in the product itself. So with kombucha, real quick, it is black tea and sugar that you mix with a varying level of water, depending on how much you want to make. There's a particular ratio. So you're basically making sweetened iced tea, or tea. You want to keep it at room temperature. And then that's what you put your SCOBY in. And for me, I'll continue to keep making this sugared tea to feed to my SCOBYs that you just saw. And then I let it sit for a few days, and the kombucha is ready to go. I definitely highly recommend making your own kombucha. And what I wanted to show you here is actually a second fermentation of kombucha. So you can see I have some blueberries. Let's see, here we go. I have some blueberries, and you can see that actually there's some SCOBY starting to form. That doesn't always happen, but I've had this out for a number of days now. They call it second fermentation, and what that means is my kombucha has finished. I taste it. It tastes really good. It's fizzy, and the fizziness comes again from the breakdown of that sugar. The byproduct is this acid that comes through, and that's what makes the carbonation. Really neat. And we'll talk about a recipe in a second. And so that's just plain kombucha. And now my second fermentation is actually adding to that plain kombucha some flavorings. In this particular instance, it happens to be blueberries. You can do mango, you can have sweet potatoes, I've seen. Ginger, I love putting ginger in my kombucha for a second fermentation. And at that point, I tend to add a little bit of honey to my second fermentation, and then I'll let it sit for another several days while the blueberry flavor is incorporated into the kombucha, and the honey is a sweetener that just gives the kombucha another little bit of food to get it extra bubbly. When I make kombucha, I always use white sugar. I don't use honey, and it's just one of those things where everything that I've read about kombucha is using white sugar. And again, it's going to eat that sugar during the fermentation process. But if anybody knows of anyone who's used, honey or other kinds of sweeteners, please let me know. But I tend to not mess with the process too much with that. Another kind of fermentation is kefir. That was another, before the kombucha craze, kefir, or the drinkable yogurt, was another really popular fermentation. And it's great. I love it. This one happens to be a water grain. There's also kefir that is lactose, which means it uses milk. So the lactose in milk to make the fermentation process. And I loved it. So with the kefir grains, which again, like a SCOBY, you need to, I don't know anybody who's able to like make their own grains from nothing, right? Like I've never seen anybody who, one day just like adding a little bit of this and some yeast and some bacteria have been able to make a SCOBY mother. It's usually, we get the SCOBY mothers from somebody else who has one, and it grows from there. So again, if anybody knows, the origin, a recipe for making either a SCOBY or kefir grains, let me know. But everything I've seen is like, yes, you need to have these grains, and you really can't make it yourself. Like the SCOBY, the kefir grains will continue to grow as you feed it, and it can make a lot of that product. And so I kind of got kefired out one day, and the kefir that I was making was with milk. And again, it's one of those things where you would mostly feed the kefir cow milk, not necessarily goat milk or bison milk or other kinds of animal milk. It would be cow milk. And so it is a very tangy flavor, very tart, and it is, yes, like very much like a very liquidy yogurt, but I think a lot more tart than regular yogurt. So if you like that kind of thing, I definitely recommend trying some kefir. Again, something that you make it on your own, you're very empowered, and you save a lot of money. You know where your milk is coming from, and you can alter the flavors as much as you want. Another way to ferment is two different things that I want to talk about is sprouting and soaking. Now, these are fermenting on the side of activating an enzyme process. So with sprouting, I wanted to show everyone, I have this little sprouting kit that I ordered from this really cool company. They're called, oh wait, no, actually, I forgot what the name of the company is called. This is just the sprouting container that you can buy from them, but they're just all about sprouting foods. It's really neat. So this container, and you can do this on your own. You don't need to get a sprouting container, but it's basically like just a cup. And in this instance, you could do something like a jar. You can definitely ferment in jars. And then this insert here, which has holes. Because you'll want to, when you start sprouting, what you do is you soak the beans, the legumes, the seeds in water for a certain amount of time. And again, there are instructions on how to do all of this online. This particular kit, again, came with directions. It's super easy. I definitely recommend, trying your hand at this because it will work. It really will work. And it's just awesome when you start to see things sprouting or beginning to ferment. But anyway, so you soak either the beans, the legumes, the seeds, as I said. And then at some point you have to release the water. And so this particular method makes that part really easy. But you can easily just dump the seeds or whatever you're trying to sprout in a colander, put it back in the jar, and fill it back up with water. So you have to do that a few times. And then eventually what you'll do is you'll actually need to aerate the soaked product. And so this particular kit, there's a lip in here. And so if say I'm soaking some chickpeas, the peas are in here, the chickpeas are in here, and I can twist this. So where once it was laying flat, now it is propped up, and that can just allow for air circulation. And so it just makes it a little bit easier. But again, tons of instructions online on how to do your own home sprouting. So as I mentioned, you will sprout things like beans, seeds, legumes, but you will soak things like nuts. And the same kind of process happens where the breakdown within that seed will begin to happen and enzymes are released. And like I was mentioning earlier, those enzymes, that breakdown process makes the nutrients of that particular product a lot more easily digestible for your body. So some of the benefits of sprouting or soaking your foods. Okay. And I also just wanted to mention, because we are dealing with bacteria, we want to make sure that we have a space for only that good bacteria to grow, that whenever we are using materials, that we just want to make sure everything's nice and clean, to start off with, because that just helps ensure that we're not accidentally introducing some bad bacteria into the foods that we are starting to ferment. So I wanted to talk about one particular fun product that I wanted to show everyone, and that is how to make your own natural soda. Because here we are in the dog days of summer, and a lot of us maybe are trying to not maybe drink, or maybe we don't drink alcohol. We don't want to have that corn syrup sodas that come in the grocery stores, but we want something a little bit more fun and festive. And so making your own natural sodas is a great way to have a healthy, fun, and festive drink during summer. I happen to be up to my eyeballs in blueberries from my CSA, Lancaster Farm Fresh Cooperative. I love them. These are some organic blueberries that were grown in by Big Bucks Farm, and they are in New Jersey. So I have about 48 pints of blueberries that I was able to buy from my CSA, most of which are in my freezer right now. And so I thought, hey, let's make some blueberry soda. So the fun part about making your own soda is you want to start with, well, you can use the whey. There's lots of recipes for making your own fruit sodas using whey, like I mentioned before. But I wanted to show everyone a really fun and tasty way to start fermenting to make your own soda using what they call a ginger bug. And so I started this ginger bug about a week ago. And so let me see if I can, before I explain to you how I did this. It smells so good. I wish you could all smell this. If we were all together, I'd be passing this around for you to smell. But I think maybe you can see here, there's some bubbles. So that lets you know that this has, let me just pour liquid all over my computer. Okay, that might not work. But I can tell you from the inside, there's all kinds of bubbles, and that this is a very, kind of like the kombucha, there's already a lot of fizziness happening because of the fermentation that's taking place. So a ginger bug is a really common fermentation process that there's lots of different, you can Google it, it's on Pinterest, and all the recipes are pretty much the same. So what I did was I just filled this jar with some water, some filtered water. And then on day one, I put in 2 tablespoons of sugar. So much like the making the kombucha, you know, this particular lacto-fermentation uses sugar, which is another really great way to preserve food or to ferment food. So 2 tablespoons of sugar, and then I grated directly into the jar. You can see my little grating, some ginger. And then I stirred it all up so that the sugar dissolved. And sometimes that takes a little while because the water was at room temperature. I didn't boil it. So I just stirred it enough to dissolve the sugar, and then had my ginger in there. And then day 2, I did the same thing. So 2 tablespoons of sugar and a tablespoon of the shredded up ginger. And then I stirred it. And I try to stir this a couple times a day. And then I did that for about a week. And here we have this really fun, what they call a ginger bug. So this, because of the room temperature, because of the presence of the sugar, this attracted some good bacteria, this lacto bacteria, into my beverage here. And I just kept feeding it more sugar and more ginger. And so this will be the basis for how you make your own soda over the summer. So there will be more fermentation that will happen. So basically what you want to do to make your own, in this instance, blueberry soda, is you'll take about 6 cups of blueberries, a half a gallon of water. And again, you can easily Google this if this one in particular calls to you. 1.5 cups of sugar, and then you'll need 1 cup of your ginger bug. So then what you want to do is you're going to boil your the water and the sugar, and that way it'll all dissolve. And then get that to room temperature. And then once that gets down to room temperature, you're going to add your blueberries. Oh, I'm sorry, don't get it down to room temperature. Keep it to a boil, then add your blueberries, bring it back up to a boil. And then simmer the blueberries and the sugar in the boiling water for about 10 minutes. And now some of those blueberries are going to pop open, and it's just going to become this nice blueberry liquid. And taste it as you go. You might want to add more blueberries. You might maybe want to add a little bit more sugar. But I think I tend to maybe want to add more blueberries than anything else, and maybe adding more sugar. And once you get it to a flavor that you like, then take that blueberry liquid and you put it into a jar that can fit. Now remember, you want to have enough space, because you're going to want to, once it does come down to room temperature, then you are going to want to add 1 cup of your ginger bug. So it's come down to room temperature now. So you have the blueberries and the sugar, it's all dissolved in your jar. It's now at room temperature. I would say I would probably wait, until the next day, maybe wait overnight. Then you're gonna add your culture and stir that up. And then you're just gonna wait between 3 and 7 days. And then you'll start to see, as I showed you with this, some more bubbles starting to form. And then you can taste it along the way, just so you can get a sense of the process and the changes. And I also recommend doing that too. Like if you start to sprout your own foods or soak them, just taste them every once in a while and maybe make note of what you are tasting. And then after 3 to 7 days, the product has been fermented. And again, that will depend on how hot your house is and how much of an active fermentation do you want. The longer you let it sit out, it is eating up that sugar. And so the longer it continues to ferment, the less sugar you'll have. And so by the end, you can actually get something that's pretty tart and closer to a vinegar. But when you're ready to drink it, all you have to do is take the drink and strain it and put it directly into your cup. Or if you want to get some of these, cute little bottles that have the flip top, that's totally great too. And you're good to go. And it's super tasty, as I said, a fun, healthy drink for summer. And so actually, this is a bit of a faster class. I know that we have until 8 o'clock, but I did want to just pause there and to see if anybody has any questions. But before I do that, I will say one resource that I use is DIY Fermentation. And this was written by Catherine Green. So I definitely recommend this resource book. And again, I mean, there's just so much out on the internet. As with most things, I would say read a few different recipes. So if you're looking for ginger bug, for example, just Google it and read a couple of different approaches to it, and then decide on the one that works best for you. If you see mold or anything that looks kind of funky in your fermentation processes, I would say compost it, pour it down the drain, be on the safe side. You just saw my home SCOBY, and that's just a white, maybe a little slightly brownish blob. But if I ever started to see any dark spots or any green spots, I would throw the whole thing away. And so that's something to be on the lookout too, just in case. As I mentioned before, with my cucumbers that I was trying to make into pickles, there was some hairy mold on there, and so I had to throw the whole batch away. But it is always better safe than sorry when you're starting out. So just trust your instincts. Take pictures. Feel free to again send them to me if you have questions. But I always say err on the side of safety. You can always start again, and you will eventually start to get it right if you want to get to that spot of making your own fermentation. I've had mostly only positive successes in my attempts to make new kinds of fermented foods. But let me pause there and see if anybody has any questions that I can answer. I know this was a lot of information on the beginnings of fermentation, but yeah, let's see if I can help anybody.
Hi, thanks so much for doing the talk. This has been really fun. I'm definitely going to try the soda. That sounds awesome.
Oh, yay.
Whenever I see any kind of, pickling or fermentation going on, I always see, it's always in a glass jar. Is the glass absolutely necessary for any kind of fermentation?
So I also tend to stick to glass. And food grade plastics are also fine. So you'll see, when I have my little seed guy here, it's in plastic, but there's no heat that's introduced to this. But glass is used often for the first reason is it's non-reactive. So metal, for example, will actually negatively react to your SCOBY bacteria and yeast. It doesn't like it. It's not necessarily going to kill it, but it can seriously reduce the ability of the process to continue. So even with my little spout on the inside, it's a food grade plastic. So that's why a lot of times you'll see these things in glass, just because it is non-reactive. And if you ever have concerns about, well, is that plastic food grade? You know, if it's not, there can be potential leaching involved, because some fermentation, you know, with brine, it's very acidic, and so things could leach. And so that's why we would really want to have food grade safe plastic. It's pretty neutral. And metals, again, depending on what you're fermenting, it can, you know, cause a negative reaction. It's not going to be anything like, oh, you know, my kefir or my kombucha was in a metal container. Now it's going to react negatively once I drink it. It's nothing like that. It'll just, again, interrupt the ability of the bacteria and the yeast to do its thing. And then, you know, lastly, I will say too, glass is renewable resource forever. It can be melted down and made into more glass infinitely, unlike, you know, some plastics, we can't do that. So it's just an environmentally friendly product to use to hold your fermentations. Great question.
Thank you.
Of course.
Hey, I have a question about relishes. I've really liked making relishes with like a salt, well, with salt basically. But every once in a while they turn out too salty in the end. And I'm wondering, like, I'm just going with like a standard ratio there, but I'm wondering if, you know, I know that if I make like a lacto fermented pickle that I can like cut the brine with water if it ends up too salty, but curious what a strategy could be with relishes.
Yeah, you know, I would try to reduce the amount of salt in the relish. It might be, you know, but you don't want to do it so much where it's not gonna ferment and break down. It might just be one of those things where, you know, it's a flavor preference that you might have. You could also try other things, kind of like how you cut it, the brine. Maybe once you have that finished product of your relish, maybe you want to add some fresh, you know, if it's you know, cucumbers or whatever you maybe made the relish with. Maybe you want to add some, you know, non-fermented of that product too, to cut it that way. But yeah, I mean, I too have found that to be the case. I'm not a huge salt person in my day-to-day life. I just actually dehydrated some fish in a brine, and ooh, it was just salty. It was just salty. So yeah, I think cutting it with fresh stuff, Danielle, might be a good method, and trying a few other kinds of recipes. But yeah, when salt's the main method, it's harder.
Cool, thank you.
Absolutely.
Also, will you be sharing the ginger bug like ratios?
I definitely will. Yep, I'll share the ginger bug. And like I said before, if anybody's interested in making their own kombucha, you can get in touch with Josh and you can find me, and I can definitely make sure you get a little ginger bug. And oh, I also wanted to show everyone, I made some kimchi. So this was really fun. It's spicy, and this uses salt to break down the cabbage, and it also has some chili powder here. It's a super simple recipe, very tasty, it keeps for several months. But I will definitely share my particular ginger bug recipe for sure. Yep.
Hi, Regina. I asked about whey fermentation, so I'm wondering what's the best way to get started. Is it possible to, you know, just use store-bought yogurt and kind of drain that liquid off the top to start your whey starter, or is it, you know, better to try and make your own yogurt, or to use like yogurt from a farmer's market or something?
So you know what, Lucas, when I first started making, you know, using whey, I would use yogurt from the store. And I would get the yogurt that I could find that had the most bacteria listed. And so ones that I love are Brown Cow, was it 7 Star? And I also love Seagus. And I know some people are like love hate with Seagus, but I do like them. And so I've used those yogurt brands to collect whey. And also, I will say when I make my own yogurt, if say like again, you can overdo it for a little while. You're like, how much yogurt can I eat every day? You sometimes took a pause on these foods. Like I took a years-long pause on the kefir. I was like, no more kefir, and I'm overrun by Kefir Grains. When I start back up again to make my own yogurt, I will use store-bought yogurt, and I will just get a little cup, the 1 cup of the brand that I want, because you just need a tablespoon of live yogurt to make your own yogurt batch, and to get milk trickling springs or whatnot. So that is completely fine to start off with store bought, and then if you start to make your own yogurt, yes, absolutely, then you'll have some whey in that regard too. So either can work, but ain't no shame in starting off with store bought product.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and good luck to you. That'll be a fun journey.
Yeah, I'm excited, especially trying out making whey soda and the ginger bug. That'll be great.
Yeah, super, super tasty. And I will say, friends love it. I make more of the stuff than I can consume myself, with the knowledge that my goal is that I have enough that I can give to my friends. And so when you make, I just said half a gallon of water to start off with to make this that particular blueberry soda recipe, it's going to make a lot of quote unquote soda. And so it's just an awesome thing to share with folks. Danielle mentioned the salsa that she likes to make. You can definitely double these batches, and they do keep for a really long time. And it's just like a really neat and different thing to bring to gatherings. And I know we're all social distancing right now, so maybe it's a social distance gathering, or just something to drop off to a neighbor, and knock on the door, walk away, and let them know that you care. But it's really fun.
What tips can you share for like increasing the crunchiness of lacto-fermented pickles? Like every once in a while, I feel like I make a not as crunchy batch.
It happens all the time to me too. And so I will say, starting off with smaller cucumbers is key. I know we tend to, like I was gone over the weekend and I came back and I had like a pretty big cucumber. It probably isn't going to make the best, pickle, because it's already has a lot of water, because it's that much bigger. And so there's that. I once Googled that, Danielle, and I'm trying to think. Let me also share that with Josh, because I'm trying to think. There was like another thing that you could do to help increase crunchiness, especially with cucumber pickles.
I can share a couple of things I've read, but like none of them have really worked for me.
Yeah.
So I've tried, like, black tea is supposed to help, but I feel like it just makes it more susceptible to like potential mold or for sure.
Okay.
And it more like mold if I kept the tea bag in the pickles after I put them in the fridge even. And then grape leaves, but I have no idea where to secure grape leaves.
That is so fascinating. So let's see. I would say, I don't know if you have any grocery stores like a Mediterranean grocery store near where you live, but that might be a good place to get some grape leaves. And I would say like a Whole Foods would maybe have just plain grape leaves, as opposed to, I don't know if Giant or Safeway would have them, because that's fairly specific, but always worth a call. I have not heard of those 2 tips, so that's really helpful, and I just learned some stuff. So thanks for that, Danielle. I'll look into the tips that I found, because I don't think it was either of those, and make sure that I send that off to Josh for you to capture later.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's always the thing. We're always in pursuit of the crispy pickle.
Totally.
Great. So please feel free to unmute if you have other questions while I send us into the wrap up portion of our time together. I did want to just thank you all so much for your time. I am available for other questions or tips that you want to share. I do love this stuff so much. It is just really fun and great to share this knowledge with other people. And as we begin our journeys, or wherever we are on our journeys, there's always just so much more to learn as we go along. So please know that I am a resource for all of you as you make your way through your fermentation journey. And I also have, they've already been recorded, but I did have each year I do a class on water bath canning. So that's available to all of you, as well as I did a class on how to make, as I was mentioning before, your own DIY home products. So, when we think about vinegar as a method for preserving food, it's also a wonderful natural cleaner as well. So if anybody is trying to get away from, harsh chemicals from the store, I definitely recommend checking out that class. And if you have questions on either of those other two processes, just let me know as well. I'm always happy to chat and nerd out about any of those topic areas. So thank you all so much. It was awesome to spend the hour with you, and I look forward to hopefully talking to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Regina.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.